Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Politics Today, and in this programme today we shall be discussing the French parliamentary elections that are now posing an existential threat not only to France but also to that of the entire European Union. And could the National Rally Party be on the verge of power? And what does this mean for French EU relations? So in this programme today, I'm joined by my good friend, Robin Benson, who's a Christian commentator. Good to see you, Robin. And also Alistair Scott, the UK Director for Vision for Israel. So welcome to the programme. And we've got to be very careful with this programme because as this programme goes out on polling day, and this is why we're discussing the French election. We have to wait for next week to discuss the British elections. But Alistair, just share your thoughts on the French presidential election. The French parliamentary elections. After we see the disastrous showing of President Macron's party in the recent European elections. We know then he called for parliamentary elections, and it looks like he's come in third place and has done so badly in this first round of elections. Share your thoughts on the success of Marine Le Pen's party, the National Rally, formerly the National Front.
Yeah, well, if you look at what happened as a result of the EU elections, it wasn't a French election or situation or even a poll in France. He kind of reacted very fast because it moved to the right, not necessarily the far right, but to the right in the EU. And he kind of just called a snap election. And whether he was thinking it through at the time where France were preparing for the Olympics and so on, to call an election was kind of a difficult time to do it. I mean, it's quite difficult for us when we had the election called at the snap suddenly within 6 weeks of it taking place. But Marine Le Pen has sort of, to use a word that's been used a lot in our elections, she's changed the National Party, the National Rally Party, and moved towards the centre. And it's been going on for years, and even in the previous election, she's been standing up and saying they do not stand for the same things as her father did before her, and her father was a very, very much a fascist, far-right individual. So they are trying to reform themselves, rename themselves, which they have. So it's not surprising. I think the problem has been the same in France and in our nation and other nations. People are coming against the globalist ideas, but also I think people, certainly what I've seen here talking to people on the streets, they are just needing a change, and therefore they're not really taking seriously what the other parties stand for, but they just want to change from what's happening. So for Macron, he's become very unpopular, as we've seen in the first round of elections. He ended up in third place, not even second place, which is quite a low-down situation. But Marine Le Pen, she seems to be very popular. She looks good on television. She sounds good, even though I'm not great in French. When she's speaking in French, I kind of pick up what she's saying. So I can see she's quite attractive, and I'm not talking about the physical attractive, but attractive politically at this time for France. But it's going to be a major shaking around Europe.
Yeah, good to see you on the programme, Robin, as well. Now, we see really that what has occurred in the past week in France is nothing but a political earthquake, because for the first time in French history, Marine Le Pen has held the unprecedented triumph of her party, the National Rally Party, in these first rounds of parliamentary elections. Is this a pushback on the globalists? The fact that we're seeing the French rejecting the policies of Macron, and when we remember his inauguration as French president, we saw that not only did he have the tricolour, the French flag with him, but he's also next to the European Union flag. And now it seems the French have had enough of him and his parties and his politics, and are willing to give Marine Le Pen and the National Rally Party a go, particularly with these very important parliamentary elections that have just taken place last weekend and the last round coming up this Sunday.
Yeah, I think we face a situation, as we observe from the outside, that politicians in France, established politicians, like in many other European nations, take their populations for granted. They think, I think they think that people don't really care about the policies that they present. And I think it has been an earthquake. It has been a wake-up call to the elites in France that there is a rising tide, as we've seen in other nations in the European Union, a rising tide, as you say, of frustration with the globalists, yes, but I think it's more to do with the European Union itself. It's perceived as this monolith with the different tiers in Strasbourg and so on that hand down policies to the rest of the nation states, and it's basically like it or lump it. And I think a lot of folk in France and in other nations, we've seen the same thing in Holland, there's indications of it in Germany, you've got Hungary, where the people have had enough. They've had enough of illegal immigration. They've had enough of large numbers of migrants coming in legally but still causing problems. This is their way of poking the establishment in the eye and telling them, no, we're not going to take this anymore. Now, as you rightly point out, looking at the figures, the National Rally also took 33% of the vote. So that's a third. Then the other two major parties, I think Macron came third with 20%, something like that. And the other the one in the middle, the leftist party, was 28%. Yeah. Now, if that filters through to the second round, and right now, as we're sitting here recording this, there are all sorts of political machinations going on to try to stop the National Rally Party getting any further success. So people being asked to drop out in constituencies to let the third person win the vote and not let NR in. Well, we'll see. 33% is a lot, but it's not a majority. And I think we just need to wait and see another week to actually whether they can transfer that 33% into an overall majority in the French Assembly. Because if they can't, then the whole thing is just up in the air as to where French politics is going to go.
Absolutely. Oh, and we have to mention the kind of National Rally Party, formerly known as the National Front. As you mentioned earlier, it was led by Jean-Marie Le Pen. The party was very sympathetic to the Nazis. It was a kind of fascist far-right party, riddled with kind of Jew hatred, but Marie Le Pen seems to have done a lot to transform and modernise the party itself. They are now on the verge of political power if they win the parliamentary elections this coming Sunday. And at a time when Paris hosts the Olympic Games, and France will be the showcase of the world for the Olympics. Share with us your thoughts on this huge political transformation that is going on in France, that we've seen not only in France, but as Robin's rightly said, in the Netherlands, in Germany, and of course not standing Italy, because I think Italy led the way first as well. So from these core member states of the European Union, there seems to be a clear rejection of the globalist policies of the EU, and even willing to vote for a reformed National Front party as well, under the very charismatic Marie Le Pen, but also her junior called Jordan, who could be the youngest ever Prime Minister in France at the age of 28, who's incredibly charismatic, and he's galvanised millennial and Generation Z voters like no other politician.
Yeah, and it's true, the younger ones, I mean, Macron, when he first got elected, was a young man and looked very modern and similar to Trudeau in Canada. There was like a group of people coming into leadership who were almost like copies of one another. They seem to fit into this mold. And this young man, aged 28, is even younger than they were when they came into power. But you can see what's happening around it. I'm reminded of the scriptures, in Haggai chapter 2, verse 6, it talks about he was going to shake up the nations, and Hebrews 12 also reflects that once more I will shake up the nations and the heavens and the earth. And I think, as Robin has mentioned it earlier, I think there's a bit of apathy that has come into politics generally, globally, certainly in Europe, where they think they're in a comfortable zone and they disregard how the people are thinking what's going on in the nation. And every people group, they will put up with so much, but when it starts hitting your pocket and you start seeing your lifestyle go so low down, and you can't, when you talk to young people, they are without hope, even in our nation, and I'm certain it's the same in France and around Europe too, because they can't see a way through the kind of financial debt and the lack of opportunity that's around them. So you can see that in every nation, the desperate people are going to vote for a change. And I think that's what's happened here. There's no doubt Marine Le Pen has moved to almost be central right. But is that just in order to win the vote, or is she going to come back if she's voted in? It's not certain as yet, the final result, whether she will turn even further right. We don't know. But there are extremes. I mean, I'm talking to
I would say that was unlikely, primarily because she's got her eyes on the French presidential election of 2027. She's ran twice now for the position of president. She's come very close, but she wants to win it. Yeah. So I don't think she's going to do anything that would upset that. I think by having the young Prime Minister and her protege, Jordan, take the position of Prime Minister for the National Rally Party will re-energise the party, give it a very youthful look that could then be the next stepping stone for her when President Macron has to stand down. Gives her a great chance then of winning the French presidency, and that's what she'll be looking at. But also, I think the French, having visited France recently, the French, like the Italians, like the Germans, like the Dutch, are very patriotic. They love their nation, they're proud of their nation, they're proud of their nation's history, but they see their nation being pretty much destroyed by these globalist policies, whether they're carbon zero net emissions policies, whether it's further European political integration into the European Union. And they hate the fact that their country is changing so much, the high cost of food prices, the cost of living crisis combined with these massive immigrants that have come into the country. Islamic ghettos and enclaves is also playing a major role with security as well. So when you see this, and they see that President Macron, for example, is not doing anything about this is when people say, well, here's a strong candidate. We want political certainty in this time. Yeah, why don't we give Marine Le Pen a go and the National Rally Party? And on that theme, Robin, it almost seems that if the National Rally Party do succeed in doing well in the second round of these parliamentary elections, and they then produce the Prime Minister, not only is Macron then a sitting duck as a president for the next 3 years, but also this poses a huge existential threat to the European Union, doesn't it? And Europe's idea of building United States of Europe and these federalist ideas start to come about because they're not bringing the people with them, and the people don't want this, and the British people didn't want this. This is why we voted to leave the European Union back in June of 2016.
Yeah, and in my mind, you have to start asking the questions, okay, if this threat actually becomes real as of next Sunday, that the National Rally Party have a big enough majority that they actually leave Macron no other option but to offer the president, Jordan, I can't remember his name, I'm sorry. Anyway, offer him the premiership. I mean, where is that going to leave France within the context of the European Union? Because you're going to have a situation where the president, who by tradition, not by constitution, has defence primarily as his responsibility, and the prime minister and his government take responsibility for the day-to-day running of the country, and the president also has foreign affairs. So you've got the two major aspects of French life within the context of the global community, where the two leaders are going in completely opposite directions. How is that going to work in the French Republic as it stands at the moment? How is that going to work in its interrelationships with the rest of the European Union? How is it going to work in its relationship with us? You know, across the channel. Lots and lots and lots of questions. Yeah. And there is a factor here, I think, that sometimes that we forget, that across the European Union, in fact, across the westernized world, birth rates have dropped dramatically over the last 2 or 3 decades at least. And so France is faced, as many other nations are, with allowing some of these immigrants in order to try and maintain the standard of living that many French people have become accustomed to. We face the same problem here. So again, you know, the whole issue of immigrants, I know there's the illegal ones, but the actual legal immigrants, there is a point to why it's been happening in many European nations. But it is an aggravation for normal, run-of-the-mill French people who see this going on. But they don't realize that they're actually part of the problem in not birthing more children to replace the older people that are passing away.
Absolutely, and the other question is that abortion across Europe has really meant that as a Western civilization, we're committing suicide.
We're teetering on the brink.
And when historians look back at this period of history and say, why did the West fall from grace? You can point the fact of abortion legislation, abortions being carried out, that have really effectively, terminated an entire generations, not just a generation, but entire generations of young people. Therefore, we need immigrants to come in to fill those roles. And of course, that's created not only a political vacuum, but also a spiritual vacuum as well. But how do you think, Alistair, the European Union will respond to this? Because when we look at the European Union, I know you're very involved with the European Coalition for Israel. And when we look at the European continent, it's 2 nations that are driving this project, the French and then also the Germans. The Germans are driving the European Union, its economy, whilst the French dictate EU foreign policy. Now, if we get to a state where the National Rally Party, for example, have a parliamentary majority, they have a prime minister in place, they are very Eurosceptic, this is going to cause huge rifts, not only between France and the EU, but also the EU and Macron, because Macron will be a sitting duck president without any power to do anything.
Exactly.
And any proposal by the EU for closer political, economic and social integration, surely not going to work.
Yeah, exactly. Everything you say is so right, because the alarm bells will be ringing in those who want to keep the EU running and controlling Europe. You mentioned it earlier, they're trying to form the United States of Europe. But the people, people groups, it's funny because I think back to 2016 when we had the Brexit vote, and it was very close. It was literally a 1% either way that we voted in favour of coming out. But I spoke with a lot of young people, including some of my own family, who would speak about themselves as being European rather than British. And that's part of the education system that has gone through all of Europe. It's preparing us for this kind of bigger state kind of solution. But it's for me, I think it's great that they're waking up in the nations and they're beginning to see that, our nations, we are called to be British, you are called to be French, to Germans and all that. Great that we should have peaceful communication, free borders for trade, but to try and create this United States of Europe where we're all Europeans is a dangerous thing, I believe anyway. And it's good to see there's a waking up amongst the people. And I'm sure there'll be an alarm bell. At the moment, the EU elections were just a couple of weeks ago, and it's basically holiday time until they come back at the end of the summer. But I'm sure the kind of leaders who want to keep the boat afloat will be meeting behind closed doors and planning a strategy to come back. But the major players, like you say, Germany have become, I love what's happening in Germany at the moment. They've become so pro-Israel.
And Italy as well.
And Italy too, and the policies, the latest thing where they're saying you cannot have German citizenship unless you approve of Israel as a state. Wow, come on, Britain, let's follow that one. But Robin's highlighted the problem. Migration has been necessary to fill the jobs that the Europeans don't want to do, and to keep the country afloat. And therefore, and as you talked about the birth rates, I mean, the European birth rate is low, but the migrant birth rate is sky high.
Yep.
They know what they're doing. They know that in fact, they say it among certain groups. I don't want to mention names because I know that's not right. But they know that in a certain amount of years, because of the birth rate change, they will be the majority in nations, including ours. So there needs to be a waking up call right across the European nations, including our own, and realize that the people are getting it, but the leaders have to change their ways, or else people like Macron are going to be sitting ducks. As you said, he's going to be there for another 3 years as president, but possibly with no support from within the nation, including the people and the leaders of their government. So it's a very interesting thing, and for us as Christians, we really need to be praying that in the midst of everything that's going on everywhere else, we know our eyes are fixed on the Lord. The Lord's not surprised about what's going on. He is the one who is shaking the nations. Why is he shaking? Because everything that is man-made needs to fall, so the things that are of God will remain standing. And that means, you know, the gospel needs to come up, the church needs to wake up, not only in its prayer, but also in its taking the gospel out. You know, these people need to be saved. They need to know that there is only one way to heaven. Jesus, the way, the truth, and life.
You wanted to come in, Robin?
Well, there's a couple of things sort of picking up a little bit of what Alistair was saying, but I wonder if there's another factor here, because Macron has been one of the major pushers for a European army.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then he made the announcement, or gave the indication, that maybe he was prepared to send French troops into Ukraine.
He already has.
Okay. So I just wonder if that's a factor in the disillusionment of many French voters. They see themselves potentially getting drawn into this Eastern European conflict, and they want, again, to make the French elites aware, we don't want this.
Yep.
But I wonder if there's another factor here, bringing in, you know, the scriptures, the God of Israel and all the rest of it, because remember, French took responsibility for Lebanon. And they're heavily involved at the present time, along with the United States, trying to arm wrestle into Israel in not dealing with Hezbollah. I don't want to go down that route too far, but I'm just making the point that God sees this too, and maybe some of this total chaos and confusion that there is in France is God's way of saying, you guys are messing around with my people via Lebanon and Hezbollah. This is part of the net result of me dealing with you on the basis of what you're doing with Israel.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, of course, the French had this Syrian and Lebanese mandates after the First World War, going up to their independence after the Second World War. So yeah, I think that does play. And France now has huge influence, even so now over Lebanon, but not over Hezbollah. So that could definitely be a factor. But I suppose the other thing we're seeing as well is that not only, as we mentioned, not only in France, but in Italy, in the Netherlands, in Germany, we already see that Poland is not playing ball with the EU, nor is Hungary. And it almost seems as if this European project, or a gravy train, which has been so good for the European elites and the European Commission for so long, that the wheels are coming off the train, because it's a globalist system. It's like a modern day Tower of Babel, and it's all creating one language, one empire, and one power, which makes the EU very different from historical powers or power blocks. Because historically, you needed to have a strong economy and you needed a strong military. Europe has neither, and so projects its force and its strength without those two core pillars, which doesn't make it a strong nation. And so you can see when the Bible says that the last empire will emerge will be iron mixed with clay, with a vision given to Daniel about the statue of man, the head being Babylon, and then the feet being a revived Roman Empire. So you can see that that steel is put together with clay, which shows the kind of fractions and the nations are in turmoil. But on this side of the English Channel, why is it so important that we care about what happens in France politically and what happens on the continent of Europe?
Well, I was leading a prayer meeting just a couple of days ago when the first results came through. So what are we? Yes, just literally a couple of days ago. France are our nearest neighbour. You know, apart from Ireland, the other side, or the Republic of Ireland, the other side, they're our nearest neighbour in Europe. And sure, you know, we want to be in good relationships with your neighbour. You know that where you live, and you want to have a good relationship with your neighbour. And because you've said it before, we've said it before, France is a major player in Europe. So what happens in France is going to have a major effect on Europe. And Europe is our main trading group anyway, despite us having Brexited. So of course we need to be aware of what's going on in France, and it's no different. I really believe with all my heart that the people have just got tired of the same old move towards getting rid of the French people and being part of a bigger people group, and they just want to change. And you see the same, anyone who's been watching the whole politics situation in our country, I mean, the word change is heard so often that you think, well, that's what they're trying to it's almost like trying to affect people's way of thinking. If you mention the word long enough, people say it's time for a change. Yeah, you know, I'm sure that's the right thing to do. But it's reality in France. There has been a major turning around. They have seen the dangers of losing their personality, their character, and the people are saying enough, and they see the threat of migration and how it's affecting the economy of France. So yeah, I think there's a major reality. We need to be aware of what's going on in France, because it's slightly different, but it's not that different from what's happening in our own nation. People are looking to
We've got 2 minutes left of the programme, so I kind of need to sum up now. But I mean, if we look at what's happening in France, and particularly as Marine Le Pen has said before, that if she wins the French presidential election, I think she stands a very good chance in 2027. She wants to call for a French referendum on France's membership of the EU, which will cause an existential threat to the European Union. That if the French vote to leave, then this whole European project is over. But also we see, for example, as we mentioned, Italy turn away from the EU, Hungary, the Netherlands, Germany now, and with Trump coming to power possibly in November on the other side of the Atlantic, this is a major blow, isn't it, for the globalist ideas of moving towards world government, closer cooperation and harmony, when the people themselves are saying, we want our nation states back.
Yes, it is. But you and I look at Scripture, Simon, and we see Scripture saying that this is going to happen.
It's going to happen.
We may be able to thwart it, you know, or put a roadblock in its way for a short period of time, but it is still going to happen at some point.
Absolutely.
So prophetic word, isn't it?
So Alistair and Robin, thank you so much for being my guests for Politics Today. Done a great job. I'm very impressed with your knowledge of France as well. And I just want to thank you for watching this programme at home. We have to watch very carefully what happens across the other side of the channel in France and on the continent of Europe, because what we're seeing there is a political earthquake, and whoever wins the general election today needs to take note of what's happening, because what's happening politically in France is a political earthquake that poses an existential threat to the whole European project, and let's see how the Europeans respond to that. So thank you for watching this week's edition of Politics Today.